So today we're talking about the Good Samaritan. And it's probably the most famous parable Jesus has ever told. We don't talk about the cursed fig tree. We don't talk about the good seed. When you talk about a parable, the first story that usually pops into somebody's mind is the Good Samaritan. That and the prodigal son. So basically in this setting, Jesus is confronted by a young lawyer. The, quote, lawyer is sometimes also called a scribe. There's little difference between the two. They were professional teachers, and they expounded on the Mosaic law. And then they also expounded on the Talmud, which is volumes and volumes of books of traditional sayings that surround the actual writers. As the whole life of the people at this time were ruled and guided by the law, written and traditional, this professional scribe and lawyer was important and influential. So Jesus is teaching, and this guy stands up. He wants to be sure he is seen. The master was teaching in a house or a courtyard of a house. There were people just sitting around him, and to attract the attention, this lawyer stood up before putting his question to Jesus. It may have taken place near or in Jerusalem, but it's also possible that it happened in Bethany, because the next sequence is the house of Lazarus. It may have even happened there. They tested him, it says, or tempted him. They were testing Jesus for his skill in answering questions out of the law, which then again was the rule and guide of daily life. And it's not unlikely that this lawyer hoped to convict the broad and generous rabbi of some unorthodox statement, which would injure his reputation as a teacher. You see, it was a hard and comprehensive question, and this query on how eternal life was to be won was probably carefully prepared to try to trip Jesus up. Now, Jesus uses the parable of the Good Samaritan to answer the legal question with a legal question. Very good practice. But I was wondering, why the example of a Samaritan? So I was looking it up, and there's this quote I found. It says, imagine the hatred between the Serbs and the Muslims, or between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland not too long ago in our recent history, or the feuding between street gangs in Los Angeles or New York. And you get some idea of the feeling and its causes between the Jew and the Samaritans in the time of Jesus. It was both politics and religion. Imagine that. The fact that there was such dislike and hostility between the Jews and the Samaritans is what gives the use of the Samaritan in the parable such power. The Samaritan is the one who is able to rise above bigotry and prejudice of centuries and show mercy and compassion for the injured Jew after the Jew's own countrymen pass him by. Mercy and compassion. That's the challenge of this story. The parable addresses physical injury, but we know that with physical injury, that's just the surface of such an event as this one. Underneath it all lies trauma. Imagine, if you will, to be randomly mugged and beaten on the street and no one around. Fear sets in. Anxiety builds as you wonder whether this is the place and this is how you're going to die. Then you notice hope coming down the street. Someone is coming, and it's a priest yet, a leader of the people, a person whose lineage passes from father to son. See, in order to become a priest, one had to be the son of a priest and be pure in mind and body. And according to the Pentateuch, priests were also said to be from the tribe of Levi. It is likely, based on both the biblical and Mesopotamian texts on the priesthood, that every time a priest came to the temple to carry out his service, his purity would have been tested by a group of other priests. They would probably physically examine him for skin disease or broken bones and make sure that there was no allegations of misconduct. So you may hear something in this definition, purity. A priest had to remain pure. So why does he pass up the man lying injured on the road? One commentator thought that the priest did so because in Numbers 19 states that he must avoid corpse impurity. Touching a dead or dying body, even holding a hand over it, would render a priest ritually impure and put his temple service at risk. So the priest passes by. And any and all hope that the poor man had on the side of the road goes with him. This hope has been dashed, his fear has been heightened. We may be able to add depression to his systems at this point. Then the Levite is seen heading towards him. The victim, yet again, is building up hope, but the Levite passes by on the other side. In one reading, it says the priest crossed the road to avoid him. And then it says the Levite passed on the other side. Now I can't help imagining literally the Levite pressing his back against the wall and sidestepping by, so close that the victim could almost reach out and touch him. Now the Levites have less of a right than, quote, that of the priest, particularly. Therefore, because of the lower expectations for Levites, the reasoning that it might impair temple function is less of a concern as a generic Levite task for menial, sometimes janitorial, and other trivial temple duties. So there would be nothing to impair his function. So by selecting a Levite as a secondary character, Jesus moves from the most prestigious character, the priest, a pillar of the community, to the common man on the street type character, and finally to the villain archetype, which will be the next character. The Levite thereby provides a transition from one end of the continuum to the other. And there's also a possibility that this, quote, lawyer was himself a Levite, for they were well versed in the law. That was their tradition. So it may make the point a little bit stronger. It might be a little slap in the face of the guy asking the question. But as for our poor victim here, his hopes are lifted again, and his potential savior passes by, dashing all hope once again. This cycle of anxiety, and then hope, and then loss, and then fear, and then anxiety and seclusion all affect our victim here. Our hero doesn't necessarily leave any of these, at least not at first. We know that the Samaritan, upon seeing the victim, his heart goes out to him. He is moved with pity. Pity moves him past his own prejudices. Yet our poor victim, upon seeing a Samaritan, once again may feel fear rise up. His anxiety level increases for fear of more pain and or injury about to be inflicted upon him because of systematic prejudice. Because of systemic prejudice, Jesus' listeners are shocked that it is a Samaritan providing the care. But that is what he does, and he does it well. You see, the Samaritan assessed the situation and recognized the need. The website Fruit of Brokenness puts it this way. But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, the Samaritan recognized. He felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them, and he put him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. He responded. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him." He referred his care out to someone else. "And whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you." So he was going to return, and if necessary, he would repeat the process until the man as well. We have an example of biblical crisis intervention. Literally. There is more needed here. There is long-term support. Support to allow the person to express their fear and their anxieties as a result of a crime. The United Church of Christ has what is called a mental health network, and they speak of becoming a WISE congregation. WISE is W-I-S-E. It's an acronym for welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaged. This is a process much like becoming an ONA congregation. Now, the Mental Health Network states the United Church of Christ Mental Health Network works to reduce stigma and promote inclusion of people with mental illness, brain disorders, and their families in the life and leadership and work of the congregation. They say our intent is to be a resource for you, the local congregation, as you take these steps to become a wise congregation. While what you have right now from us is still a work in progress and always will be assured that we will continue to engage with you as the new insights and practical suggestions come to our attention. They say we want to hear from you so that we can pass information along to other congregations who may be dealing with similar situations. The chief goal with the toolkit that they created is your congregation to become wise. A wise congregation for mental health. There are no dues. There are no other requirements other than you will send the UCC Mental Health Network a letter confirming that you've engaged in some sort of process to become a wise mental health congregation. You could then be among other UCC congregations who have taken these steps and will be apprised of new development, new resources, new suggestions, and new ideas that can be shared with you and others, making a joint effort in the denomination as a whole. Now, I spent 15 years working with people with different abilities, from simple hearing impaired to multiple impairs to severe impairment. And I know that for most part, people are at a minimum uncomfortable around anyone who is different. And many times, people avoid those who are differently able as they fear saying the wrong thing or doing harm unintentionally. It's, quote, since 1 in 4 individuals live with a diagnosable mental health condition, it's safe to say that individuals in your congregation are dealing with any variety of mental health and substance use challenges every day. Due to stigma, many of these people may be reluctant to either seek help professionally or speak about it with their pastor or other church members. But if you create an atmosphere of openness and acceptance in the congregation and make members, friends, and visitors more likely to feel safe and free from judgment, the acceptance and sense of safety can help create a place of belonging, where truly everyone, no matter where they are on life's journey, is welcome. End quote. Now, the process actually furthers our own challenge of being an ONA, open and affirming church. It's actually included kind of in our statement already. It answers a question asked today's gospel: who is my neighbor? Now, to become a wise congregation, that sounds so lofty. There are 10 simple steps. First step is secure the pastors and leadership support. Kind of have that. 2 is gather a team of maybe 2 or 3 people who are interested in making us a wise congregation. It's interesting, the Mental Health Network does recommend that if there is somebody openly living with challenges, invite them to be part of the team. Quote, their motto is, nothing about us without us. In other words, we should not look upon this as an us-them type project, but a we project, where we are all in this together. Step 3 is to reach out to Mental Health Network and let them know that we're trying to do this, so we're not journeying alone. Step 4 is developing some education around mental health issues. And this is important because media misinformation and societal stigma against those living with mental illness or disabilities encourage us to equate mental illness with danger. Thus, the first question some faith leaders in congregation ask is becoming a wise congregation, how are we going to keep our church, quote, safe? Research and lived experiences of existing wise congregations for mental health demonstrate that safety is not an issue. Offering radical inclusion to everyone, including those with significant mental challenges and health and brain disorders, is sacred activity, but not a dangerous one. Step 5 is to write a covenant much like our ONA covenant. And there are many samples online. Then the team presents that covenant to the board, and then that board presents it for a congregational vote. Sound familiar? celebration. What's the celebration for? It's to let your community around you know that we're taking action, that we are concerned, and that we're offering loving support to those with particular needs in our community. And then step 10 is to keep ourselves abreast of what's happening, what's developing, what's new programs, what educational material we can share, what guest speakers are available to come in. This is just one way we can answer who is our neighbor and continue to expand our welcome. Well, just like the Good Samaritan in Jesus' gospel, we are called to take action. Being a neighbor is a verb. And so I'm just offering this along with other processes that we have offered in our denominations. And this is all so we can stay to our proclamation of no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. But it's more than welcome. We are going to do something about it. We are going to grow and learn from it. We're going to do better than we have, or try to do better than we have. I leave this with you for your own consideration, and if there are 2 or 3 people who'd like to explore this and take this project on, I welcome them. Many blessings to you today.